And welcome to my YouTube channel, Conversations with Rudy Rivera. Today, I am so thrilled to have today as a guest, Lydia Babb, who is a licensed hearing specialist, who I met strictly by happenstance, but has graciously agreed to come on my show. Lydia, welcome. Thank you for
Yes,
appearing.
thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Lydia, the conversation or the topic of this program is my life in the cult and how I left.
Yes.
When you and I first met, I asked you about a song. I said I was listening to this song, and you said, well, I don't know who that is. And I think it was Smashing Pumpkins. And
Yes.
how could you not know Smashing Pumpkins? And that's when you said, well, I grew up in a cult and we weren't allowed to watch television.
Yeah.
So you don't know, you don't have any of that pop culture knowledge that you would have normally had you not lived in the culture. So
Yes.
tell me a little bit about yourself, where you're at now, what you're doing now, and then let's get into how you got into this. Is it fair to say this crazy life?
100%. My life is, I should have a TV show with the crazy things that have happened to me in my life. But my name is Lydia. I'm a hearing instrument specialist, as you said previously. Just moved down to Florida after living in Texas most of my life. Grew up in the East Texas area, and that's kind of where we ended up getting into, this church that I later, realized is definitely, at the very least, very fundamentally Christian, but I personally do consider it to be a cult. So that's a little bit about me.
Well, you and probably thousands of other people consider it to be a cult because that's an institution started by Bill Gothard.
So the church that we went to was founded by a group of individuals that were not happy with the church. Like, they were in Southern Baptist churches and they felt like it was not family oriented enough. It was not, enough Christ-based, what is it called?
Faith-based?
Patriarchal, like, Christianity. So, with the following the Jesus's, I don't know if you read about the umbrella of protection in your studies of Bill Gothard, but that's like the basic principle is, God is the ultimate authority. And then under that is the father, followed by the mother, and then the children are under the umbrella of protection. And that's how you're supposed to live like a happy and fulfilled life is, by following the natural order of things that the way God intended. And the way we ended up finding this church, it's kind of a funny story actually, but so my father used to run a construction site cleanup business. And so we would go into these construction sites and we would clean out all the debris that was left over from the people that were, putting up the framework, stuff like that. And so he was actually taking a load to the dump of all this construction material. And he was driving by this farm, and out in the yard, there was a dog eating a chicken. And so my father, being the kind Southern gentleman that he is, pulled over and went up to these people's houses and was like, hey, your chicken is being eaten by your dog. You may want to know. And so, the guy that he talked to was one of the elders of the church, and ended up like extending an invitation for our family to come and join them at this church. And so we ended up going. My family was kind of moving in the direction where, the quiverful movement, I don't know if you read about that in your studies, but that's, where you allow the Lord to decide the size of your family. They weren't happy with the way that, the church was segregated into age groups, and they felt like the message should be more appropriate for everybody and that families should be involved in the religious training of the children and stuff like that. So, we found this church that we started going to, and it was very family oriented. Like, we never broke off into groups. It was everybody was in the room at the same time, listening to the same message, singing the same hymns, taking communion together and all of that stuff. So it was a good time.
So but yeah, I've read a lot about these religious cults, and
Mhm.
it all involves the process of indoctrination.
Yes.
And it's also strict discipline,
Mhm.
strict adherence, really
Yes.
not different than any other cult that's even
No.
non-religious. There's some very narrow mission statement in the sense, and then from that everything is built, and gives people very little in the way of flexibility for independent thinking.
Yes.
It's almost like you're told to think, right, and what
Yes.
to think even. So
Yes.
your family meets this person, and obviously at that point, this what he's saying, this person whose chickens were being eaten, um, convinces your family to join this church.
Yes. Yes. So we ended up going, and my family just felt like, this is the place we want to be. Like, it's very family oriented. And they felt like it aligned more with their views rather than the Southern Baptist church that we were attending previously. Um, yeah.
But how old were you then?
I was 10 years old.
And what was your thought on this? Were you just a 10-year-old, or were you oblivious to everything?
I feel like I was pretty oblivious. I was just excited to come to this, new church where, I had more friends because I wasn't the odd kid out because my parents were, perceived as strange and having different beliefs. And, I was kind of a black sheep at the place that we were going before. And so now I'm here with this group of people, and, my parents were very strict on like modesty and stuff like that. I remember even before we joined this church, I was on a softball team as a little girl, and all the girls got these little, those little softy shorts, and they got the team name printed on the behind. Oh, isn't that cute? Well, my mother was having none of that because nobody needs to be looking at your behind, and so I got to get like these bigger shorts that were very baggy and long enough where my fingers were, you know at the end of the seam on the shorts. And like, it was a dramatic scene for that. And it just really ended up feeling like I was alienated from the groups of people that I was interacting with daily, because my family was so different, and our beliefs were so different, and so you didn't really get to make a lot of great friendships out of that, because you're weird, my parents are telling me to stay away
Yeah.
from you, that kind of stuff.
Oh, I know what it's like. People think
Yeah.
you're, believe me, but
Yeah.
it, people, groups that radicalize other people
Mhm.
generally target people that think like that. They feel like they're the odd man out. They don't belong. But this is a little
Yes.
different. I don't know that you were radicalized. Your parents just found a place where they thought they belonged.
Yes.
It wasn't like a series of indoctrinations getting you to believe it. Your parents already believed what they did, and then
Yes.
found this place where the beliefs were similar.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So I wanted to be clear, it wasn't a
Yes.
radicalization. It was like
No, it wasn't like
they
we went
found home.
into it one
Yeah.
way and like, completely 180 degrees flipped our lives around. It was more like okay, these are the beliefs that we align with more so than the Southern Baptist Church. So we're going to go this route. And, it just ended up to the point where, as far as clothing wise, like, I wasn't allowed to wear pants. I wasn't allowed to wear shorts. I wasn't allowed to wear shirts that had no sleeve. Like, you had to completely cover your arms. You know, the best people always had, their skirts down to their ankles, because God forbid you cause one of your brothers in Christ to stumble.
Yeah.
And it was just,
And blouses, like right at the neck,
oh
no
yes, oh
showing of
yes,
the back.
yes,
Yes. All
yes,
that.
yes.
It's to avoid temptation, correct?
Yes, yes, and they really do put all that pressure on the girls in that environment, because I mean, the boys would wear polos and jean pants, and that's, men's clothing. It's not really, they don't make men's clothing as revealing as they do women's clothing most of the time.
I guess it
Um,
depends on your point of view, but your point is they don't make perhaps men's clothing as provocative as women's clothing. But
yes,
what I've seen lately in fashion,
yeah, no, absolutely.
there's a lot of
But
provocative men's clothing. Yes.
yes, but like the men in that group, they would be more normal passing than the women in this group who are wearing, skirts down to their ankles and clothes that are, up to their neck, and no, short sleeve, like no sleeveless blouses and stuff like that, where it's you go out and you very much do look completely alien as opposed to everyone else in normal society, where you really do stand out. And you would go to the grocery store, you get looks, and it's just,
But then you found the place that now you belong, and so that's where you felt comfortable. So
yes,
your parents found their nirvana, their heaven, whatever.
yes,
So you're thrust into the thick of this at the age of 10. So what
yes,
was the next step? You started going to church with them, right?
yes.
When did you actually move into like the housing? Or
So there was never any housing. It was like a group. It was a church where, everybody lived at their respective homes, and you would meet once a week, but we all abode by, very strict lifestyle
Mhm.
that was regulated by the Bible and, IBLP, Bill Gothard. And there were a lot of, other belief systems that came into play, and it ended up becoming like just everybody throws their beliefs in the pot, and then, you can't behave this way because then it's going to offend this group of people. And it was just a very, very political game where, you have to fit inside this circle that is growing smaller and smaller as people are imposing their beliefs on one another, in
Well,
order to
yeah,
avoid offending people.
but I think it's more of a singular life. Well, if you take the circle and you say,
Mhm,
you've got all these people, or even a bunch of people in a bucket, okay,
mhm,
and you're mixing them up. Well, it's like oil and water, okay.
mhm,
What you want is a single line of thinking, okay,
mhm,
and you want everyone to think like that.
mhm.
And that's really it. Whatever the precepts are, it doesn't matter what the concepts are, God, Jesus, lifestyle, what you do. That's the only way. And so it
Mhm,
leaves little room for, say, alternative lifestyles, for example.
mhm.
It
Yes,
leaves little room for thinking, differently. Well, you and I
yes,
had mentioned though that your parents sold everything when you and I were
yes,
discussing, and moved to Mexico to take
yes,
care of an orphanage. Tell us about that.
yes. Okay, so when I was 13 years old, one of the families in this home church, their daughter had just come back from like a 2-week mission at this orphanage. She came back, she was showing pictures, and it was great, and it was beautiful, and the kids were there, and she was helping these expatriates, and they were doing improvements on the compound that they had been given by the government to run an orphanage. And they had mentioned, hey, these people are getting older. They're actually looking for someone to come and take over the orphanage. Um, my family has always been very big into, like helping people. Specifically, like we had a heart for, we always wanted to adopt. We always wanted to, take in children, and we have a heart for children to help them when they were in, terrible circumstances, and be a safe place for them. And so that just felt like a really great fit for my parents. They didn't, we didn't do much recon, if you will, on these people. That they were recommended by IBLP. They were endorsed by IBLP, and, it sounded like a great fit. So here we are, we're going, and we're gonna, they got all the kids together, told us about it, and we were like, yeah, that sounds great. That sounds fun. Let's do it. Right. And, we obviously don't understand the gravity of the situation, that, hey, you're uprooting your life, you're moving away from everybody that you've ever known, and you're going to be living in an orphanage and running it. Um,
How old were you
sorry,
then? How
I
old
was
were you?
13. I was
Okay, you were
13.
13 and
So
you were going to
yes,
Mexico, live in an orphanage.
yes, yes. So, we had a garage sale. We got rid of everything we owned. I had one of those Rubbermaid containers. That was all my worldly belongings besides the suitcase full of clothes. And all four of us children, we got a Rubbermaid container, and we got a suitcase, and that was it. Um, so, we sold everything, sold our house. And this is in 2008 when
The
everything
economy
crashed.
crashed, so you
Yes,
didn't
when
get much
everything
for the
crashes.
house.
No, this was like right before the crash. So we're
Oh,
like
great.
coming back as the economy is crashing and there are no jobs to be found. And, my father was running his business and he sold the business. And so we go to the orphanage and they were very strict. At one point they were discussing, one of the children who had been horribly, horribly abused and had some severe rage issues. Just to put it into perspective, like my father, 6'3", 250 pounds at the time. This child is 5. And when he would go into a rage, my father could not restrain this child. Like he
Wow.
was so angry and had so much anger. They were talking about bringing the Mexican Dalai Lama into the orphanage to do, I don't even know what they called it, but essentially what
An exorcism.
pretty much, but essentially what they do is they wrap the child up in a burrito, like with a blanket, with a burrito, and they like irritate that child until they have screamed all of their rage out. Right. That was something that they thought was, such a great idea to do to a child who's already been horribly traumatized by the life he lived up to this point in this orphanage. And they started behaving really strangely. Things weren't adding up. They were really insistent that, my parents leave all 4 of us children with them so that they could get away. And my parents were just like, you know what, we're really not comfortable with that. We'll keep our kids with us. They were very, very just rude and angry and very, very strict with the children, didn't have a lot of compassion. It was just a weird situation. And they were also just very insistent on getting this orphanage into my parents' name. That was what they wanted to do. That was, they were just really like, let's get to it right now. My parents started feeling like something's just not right. So one day my father was on the phone with my aunt who was back in Texas, and he just started mentioning some of the stuff that was going on to them. And she was like, that sounds weird. So she did a Google search on these people, and come to find out these people are on the run from the law in the United States. They had been accused of, first of all, sexually assaulting children, which great place to be, running an orphanage. And secondly, the woman was actually like a priestess in a cult that was back in the United States. And there was someone on their compound that had died under mysterious circumstances. And by that, they got pushed off a balcony, basically, is what happened then. So, we've been at this orphanage for 2 months and come to find out all this crazy stuff is going on. And we ended up, my parents called up the elders of the church at the time, and one of them worked in law, and he was able to get a little bit more information about, these people, what they did, what's going on. And what he told my father was, you do not tell them that you're leaving. You pack your stuff up in the middle of the night. Once your trailer is packed, you hand them the keys and you leave. You do not say one more word to these people. So, at 13 years old, we had to pack up our stuff in the middle of the night while keeping it from the orphanage, because we lived in the same house as the orphanage. I literally shared a room. I was the oldest of everybody in the bedroom for the girls. And so, in the middle of the night, they would have night terrors, and I'm 13 years old trying to figure out how to comfort this child who's having these horrible night terrors from all the stuff that she's had to encounter in her life. And, first of all, that was something that I was definitely not prepared for at 13 years old, but not to mention, having to pack up our stuff, keep that a secret from these orphans that are running around the house because, they live here. And we packed our stuff up in the middle of the night. And that morning we had to tell the kids, the ones that we told that, we're here to stay. Hey, by the way, got to go. We're out of here.
It had to be heart-wrenching because kids in orphanages get attached, especially
that was definitely one of the hardest things that I've had to go through is, telling these kids, we're here, we're going to be here for you, because kids in orphanages in Mexico, they really don't get moved out. You literally grow up in the orphanage until you age out, and then you're on your own. That was how it was over there.
In my prior life, I was an adoption lawyer, and I did international adoptions out of Guatemala. I did out of Mexico some, but those systems are designed so that the kids don't get adopted, and
Yeah.
that they age out
Yeah,
of orphanage. And yeah, it's really sad, but
it
that's
is.
for a whole different discussion. So, and I also wound down an orphanage in Guatemala. Oh my God, you talk
Hmm.
about the red tape to do it. So the
Yeah.
best thing your mother and father did was not get that home put in the name, because it's not
Yeah.
like
Oh yeah.
you can just wind something down quickly. It's a lengthy
Yes.
process, and their criminal liabilities.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, and that was the point. They were trying to actually fix up the orphanage, sell it out from under my parents, and then take the money and run. Like that was their plan. Is
What
let's
they
get
were
more
probably
money out of
trying to
this.
do is take the property, sell the property, and give
Yeah.
you the company, the orphanage name. And so you're stuck with an orphanage, nowhere to house the kids.
Yeah.
That's yeah.
Yeah. So, and thankfully, like that situation did end up ending on a happy note for the orphans that lived there. I actually got to go back a few years later and see a few of the kids. And that was it was really precious. They remembered me, and oh my gosh, I cried so much because I was just so happy to see them and see that they were okay. But there was another orphanage down there called Love in Action. And these people that were running the orphanage approached them to sell the orphanage to them.
Yeah.
And they blew the whistle on them. They got the orphanage taken away, and this lady ended up getting that space as an orphanage for their company, if you will, to get the orphanage. And those kids were very happy, and they were very taken care of from what I saw when we went back there. So that was really nice. And on the way back, we had, of course, we've only been here for 2 months. And on the way down, we had just purchased a new trailer, and the paperwork for the trailer had not come through. And just out of, I said earlier, there are no mistakes. One of the days, because we would get like one day a week off when we were running the orphanage to just go and do shopping and, keep up with the stuff that's going on in the orphanage, while one of the retirees in the city that we were in would watch the children for a day, while we were able to go take care of the things that we needed to do. So one day we were in Guadalajara, and we were at this shopping center. We went, we were at this Costco, and we're going around this whole shopping center, and we see this van with Texas license plates. And we were like, oh, hey, cool. These people are from Texas. That's awesome. So are we. Not often you see someone with a Texas license plate down in Guadalajara, Mexico.
Right.
And we went on about our business and saw them again. Saw these people twice, and we were like, hey, there's those same people. They drove by us a third time, and this third time, one of the guys that was in the van, he was like, I know this is really weird. He was like, but I feel like God wants me to talk to you guys. Do you guys want to have lunch with us? We're actually working in YWAM, Youth with a Mission. They had a compound in Chapala at the time. They were like, you want to have lunch with us? So, this is around the time that everything is coming to light, and we're seeing that all this stuff is not adding up. And so we ended up having lunch with them at a Hardee's, of all places, in Mexico. And they exchanged contact information with us. So when all of this ended up going down, we don't have the paperwork for our trailer to be able to even leave the country.
Right.
So these people graciously let us stay on their YWAM base for 2 weeks until the paperwork for our trailer came through. And we were able to, safely exit the country at that time.
So you leave Mexico, and
Yes.
you go after that.
So our family had a house that was our great aunt and uncle. They lived there, and then they had passed away, and it was empty. It was in the care of their daughter. And it was full of antiques. Like, it was wall to wall antiques. But they were like, you can stay here.
Mhm.
So me and my 3 other siblings ended up sleeping in the living room of this house on bunk beds for probably close to a year, until they were able to remove the stuff. And of course, this is 2018. The economy has crashed. You can't find a job. So my family ended up buying that house later on and staying there. It's a 2.5 bedroom, bathroom house. And there are 6 of us, 4 children, 2 adults. And so, for a while there, even there were still a lot of antiques in the other bedroom, the half bedroom. So, the 4 of us children ended up in the living room, and then we finally all shared one bedroom. But that was, until we all moved out, that was pretty much it. We had 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom for 6 people. And that was fun coming back to that. So, it took a while. My father was finally able to get a job. We come back to the church that we were at, heartbroken. That's really something that's very hard to go through. It's just a different experience than anything I don't really have anything else to compare that to. So we ended up.
But you said that you left the cult at 16.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So tell me, all right, now you're back in, are you in
Yes.
the cult at this point?
So yes, we're still like in that church, in that lifestyle. And for me coming back, we had a lot of very, very traumatic things after we come back from Mexico. Like, my family was in a really terrible car accident that caused, one of my siblings to incur brain damage. And like my father had a car blow up on him. He ended up in the burn unit in Parkland while he was working on a car, and like fuel splashed on him. He was burned over 25% of his body. And there's a lot going on with us, when we come back from all of this whole ordeal. And, I definitely struggled with a lot of depression during this time. Like, on Sundays at church, you go and you do communion at the end of the service, but on the understanding that if you have any unaddressed sin in your life, you are not eligible to take communion.
Well, what is that? Unaddressed sin?
So like, you were rebellious to your parents. You talked back and you didn't apologize. Well, you can't take communion because that's unaddressed sin. You're not pure in your heart in order to be eligible to take communion. And at this time, I'm struggling with all of these emotions, processing all the things that are going on in our life. At the same time, being subjected to these very intense religious views, where, I remember crying myself to sleep so many nights thinking, like, why do I not feel saved? Why do I not feel like the joy of Jesus in my heart? I've asked him so many times to come into my life and save me and take all this sin away from me. And, for me, I was a very outspoken and rebellious teenager that definitely had a bit of an attitude problem. And so I was definitely a big problem child. So I when communion time came around, I'm, walking out of church crying because, I don't even want to be here at this point. Like, I don't want to be hanging around these people. I don't really believe or enjoy sitting here listening to how horrible of a person that I am because I don't fit XYZ mold.
Well, that's one of the characteristics of a cult, though, is
Yeah.
that if you don't have a void, they try to make you feel like you have a void.
Yes.
And
And it was like,
you never get
how
to
can I not?
perfection. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't. And, as humans, we are imperfect, and there's always an opportunity for growth in every area of your life if you want to and allow that to happen. But none of us are ever going to reach perfection. And, we're never going to get to a place where, we're spotless.
Well, did it give you, you received anxiety?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I had a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression.
You feel that it was caused by being in this situation?
It was definitely that, and just feeling like I had no control over anything that was going on, anything that was being pushed upon me as, this is the way we're going to do things. What if I don't want to do that? What if I don't believe this way?
It's most basic form. You have to eat vanilla
Yeah.
ice cream, even though you want to eat chocolate ice cream,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's just that
Yeah.
it's one way, and any deviation is a sin. You're
Yes.
not, you're not, performing under, well under the eyes of God or the pastor,
Yeah.
Excuse me, the guy above the umbrella. Okay.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
so it was very restricted. And you told me also you weren't allowed to watch TV.
Yes. So, we weren't allowed to watch TV for a long time. Like we got rid of our TV for the longest time. And then, my parents were like, okay, well, maybe this is a little too much. But we also, weren't allowed to listen to secular music, not even like contemporary Christian music, because the feeling behind that is, it's showing off and not giving the glory to God. And, any kind of music with a beat is sinful for whatever reason. And so, it was, you could listen to classical music. My parents were, very into politics. And so it was, right-wing political talk radio, classical music. That was pretty much it, because we weren't allowed to listen to even contemporary Christian
Well,
music.
Bach, Beethoven, and Chopin, right?
Yeah.
And right-wing political views, but you don't know the
I do.
Pumpkins, right?
I do. And so, so they finally did allow us to watch like movies. And by movies, I mean old movies, like nothing that had any kind of hint at God forbid, a sex scene. If the women were dressed too immodestly, if there was too much cussing in there, we were not allowed to watch this television. So, I grew up on Andy Griffith, Hogan's Heroes, which my mother didn't really like Hogan's Heroes all that much because she felt like there was too much kissing in it. And they were they were too
Green Acres,
sassy.
right?
We didn't watch Green Acres. It was mostly like Andy Griffith or a lot of Audrey Hepburn movies, which I have Audrey Hepburn up on my wall too.
Breakfast at Tiffany's.
Yes. Oh yes. Breakfast at Tiffany's. And just we weren't even allowed to watch Disney movies at that point. Like it was very, very restrictive on what we were allowed to watch, what we were allowed to listen to, what we were allowed to wear.
But this was all under the instruction and guidance of the church.
Yes, this is all the common beliefs that we held. Like I remember one Sunday, we would have what we called meal Sundays about once a month, where everybody would bring what most people would call a potluck, but we weren't allowed to use the word luck, so we called them pot blessings. And everybody brings a dish and we all eat lunch. And then it was also very restrictive on like boys and girls really aren't allowed to talk to each other because that could cause them to sin. So really I ended up, having a group of girlfriends and not really getting much conversation in with the boys, which, that was whatever. And so some Sundays we would play volleyball, and we were playing volleyball one Sunday and I had rolled up my sleeves because I did not want to get a farmer's tan. And one of the girls comes over to me and she's like, you need to roll your sleeve down. She's like, that's so immodest. You're going to cause the boys to stumble. And I was just like, I don't think I'm going to do that. Thank you. This is when I'm getting into this is absolutely ridiculous. I want no part of this. You're not going to tell me to roll my sleeves down. Like, ooh, that shoulder, right? Like, come on. And then,
but let me ask you this, Lydia. You said
yes.
You got out at 16.
Yes.
Right? Okay.
Yes.
What was the aha moment for you, and where did you go at 16?
I think it was just a culmination of, this is obviously not the way that I feel that life should be lived. It wasn't even like me going away from Christianity. I just felt like this is so restrictive. This is so based on shame and fear to keep you in line, where you're not allowed to make these decisions for yourself. You're not allowed to, come up with your own beliefs if they don't line up with XYZ, which is what, you're taught every Sunday at church. And I was just like, what, I've had enough. So I ended up applying for a job at a yogurt shop, which was very scandalous because as a woman, like growing up in this environment, I am taught, college wasn't promoted for women. You finish high school and then your job is to get married and have babies. That's your job. You are to be a keeper at home while the husband, is the breadwinner and goes out and does that and then leads the family. And so that's the way, they didn't do dating, they did courtship, which I don't know if you've ever heard of courtship, but that's basically,
it's an
essentially
arranged situation, basically.
it's essentially an arranged marriage. Yes. Because, the women, they're allowed to say, I don't think that this is a good fit, but the number of times I saw a courtship fall through was, I maybe saw one or two, very few. And these girls are getting married at 18, 19 years old, first boyfriend, if you will, but it was a courtship. And the way that would work is, the man has decided that God is calling him to marry this woman. And so the man goes to the father and talks to the father about his intentions with his daughter.
And the daughter has no say. The daughter has no say.
So, and then the father is going to bring that information to the daughter and they're going to discuss it. But the way that they train you that the man is the head of the household, of course, some man has decided that God is calling him to marry you. So it would be going against God to say no, right?
So
because this is how, obviously, if God is telling this man, hey, this is the girl for you,
even though
that would
you're
be
not
going
my
against
type,
God's plan.
even though you're not my type, God says I have to marry you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so then they would begin what was called a courtship, and the courtship process is supervised dates. You're not allowed to, and some of the families would be a little bit more lax on some of the courtship rules than others. Like some people, they would be holding hands, and that was very much talked about and very scandalous in the church, because you're the most pure of God's followers are not even going to do so much as kiss until they're married. Like you save all of that for marriage, because the idea behind that is, you're giving parts of yourself away before marriage. And what if that doesn't work out? Then you're, damaged goods. You've been used by someone else.
That's interesting. The Catholics have the same type of belief. When I grew
Yes.
up, that's what they said. But what I find interesting about that, and when I've talked to psychologists about this, because I talk to a lot of people, you've got say you get married when you're 25,
Mm-hmm.
and for 25 years you're told you can't touch, you can't kiss, you can't whatever. Then boom, all of a sudden you're on your honeymoon. It's not like all of a sudden you become uninhibited and I'm going to forget about the last 25 years.
Yeah.
So to me, it's like it makes for, in many ways, an incompatible marriage. So
absolutely. And for me personally, I actually, came out as a lesbian in 2020. So at 25 years old, I came out as, gay to my family.
They had the
and so
scandal. Oh my God, they're saying, oh, my daughter, you sinned. You're going.
And I feel like, because after I left the church, my family kind of followed suit. They kind of all decided on their own that, this probably isn't the place for us anymore. It's very, we don't feel like we align with these beliefs anymore for, whatever reason. They did have some growth during that time, and they did decide, this is really not the place. So my family has actually been surprisingly supportive. The person that had probably the worst reaction, and it wasn't even a bad reaction, was my grandfather, who is deeply Southern Baptist. And even then he was just like, I still love you. I may not think that what you're doing is right, but I do still love you, and I'll always love you. So that was really nice to have coming out of that situation where, it was such a long time of just living in survival mode, really. Because, I'm 16, I'm not making the best decisions. I really didn't even start dating until 3 years after I left this church. Because I was living in a small town and it was all hicks and there were no great prospects.
You wouldn't come out as a lesbian at that point in that church. I'm saying,
absolutely not.
Even though arranged by the church either.
Yeah, no, even though as a small child, like one of my best friends, I proposed to her because I was like, yes, this is great. I love you. Right. Let me
Yeah.
propose to him. And that I was greatly shamed for that. And then of course, going into this church environment where you're going to hell if you are gay, and that is put on you as like a huge, this you don't do this. This is not the way that God wants it to be for whatever reason. That it took me a very long time to be comfortable even admitting that to myself. Like I
How old were
dated
you?
a lot of men. 25 when I came out. Yeah, I was 25, and even then I came out as bi, and I was like, I'm still like guys, and had my first relationship with a woman, and I was like, you know what?
I
I
like this
don't
better.
I don't think that this is actually cut out for me. I truly am gay.
Yeah, I've talked to similar gays with the same experience. They
Yeah,
they were in
yeah,
heterosexual relationships, and then they tried, I guess, almost as
yeah,
in a way to see if, well, am I really gay or not, or am I
yeah,
bi? But
yeah.
yeah. So what's your feeling on religion now? I mean, what's your belief? Obviously, you still have a strong faith in God.
So, I wouldn't necessarily even consider myself a Christian. Actually, I do not deny that there is a high likelihood of there being a higher power. But I also kind of think that it's quite prideful to say that, the Judeo-Christian God is the one higher power that's out there, you know? Um, I consider myself a spiritual person. I do believe that, as humans, like we're only aware of what we can perceive in our surroundings. And, there's the fourth dimension and the fifth dimension and, all kinds of other dimensions that we have no ability to even perceive or understand. I believe it's foolish to think that there is nothing else besides our three-dimensional world. To say that there is no higher power. Um, do I believe that the way that Christianity promotes that the only way to go to heaven is by following Jesus for the rest of your life? Absolutely not. I don't feel like that really aligns with, my personal feelings. I feel like, if you're trying to be a good person and you do the right thing and you care about other people and, you try to do good in the world, that's just as important as, having faith. I do believe that having some kind of faith is beneficial. But I would not say that I am stuck with the Judeo-Christian God and all that comes with.
Well, and that's a conflict with, Christianity, and then you've got
Yeah.
the Jewish faith, and you've got Allah, and you've got Hindu. Yeah, it's all very convoluted. I've always said that, Karl Marx used to say religion is the opiate of the masses, and if it wasn't for people, religion would be a good thing,
Hmm.
because all of a sudden somebody interprets what it is, and then
Yeah.
it also changes with the time. I mean, growing up Catholic, it was a sin to eat meat on Friday. Then all of a
Yeah.
sudden somebody decided, wasn't a sin, anymore. So you can eat meat, but you should. All these rules that come up, and they just
Yeah.
and oftentimes I think they're more concerned about the rules than what's in your heart.
Yeah.
That's the issue. But Lydia, what is I say you told me about the things that happened to you, but what is the biggest side effect that you've had from all of this? I mean, do you have a trouble trusting people in a sense, or do you have, what's the one say that really negative impacted you?
So, I would say that I definitely have trust issues. I think the biggest thing for me is that growing up in that environment where, the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked, who can know it, right?
Mhm.
You're told to ignore your gut, right? And love everyone despite what they do to you and despite, how they treat you. So I mean, even just this last week, I had an issue where, I looked back at the situation. I'm like, I did not set good enough boundaries. And I knew that this was wrong. And I really need to go back and course correct on this specific situation, right? I felt like I accepted the treatment that I felt like, oh, somebody's finally paying attention to me. Someone's finally wanting to be my friend for me rather than, we're all stuck together in this group. Not to say that I didn't have, true and genuine friends in that group, because I definitely did. I still speak to some of the people that I went to church with to this day. But it was more of, you saw such a controlled environment of the real world that you get out into the real world and it's not the way you're told it was. And at the same time, you meet people and you think that they're perfectly nice and you don't see the red flags that most other people in that situation would be like, whoa, okay, that's big red flag here.
Like you were sheltered. You were like extremely sheltered.
Yes. And so I ended up, first of all, dating some emotionally abusive people. I really had not very high standards on who I would let into my life and the way that I would allow them to treat me. And, that really, even to this day, like I said, I still have blind spots where it's like, I'm still learning, and just a very important part of my healing process has been therapy. I've been consistently in therapy since 2017. And that has really helped me see, what do I want out of my life? What do I deserve? And to have somebody to bounce these situations off of and just go through them with someone that's a licensed professional that knows what a healthy boundary and a healthy relationship looks like. And, still just trying to find good, meaningful friendships that aren't taking advantage of like the goodness and kindness that I give to people. And just, it's just so different than what I was raised with. It's just, there's a lot of blind spots that you have to then go back and notice and shine the light on and work through. Well, why did I feel that way? What made me think that this behavior was okay and acceptable for this person to treat me this way, and me to just be like, oh yeah, that's fine. That's great.
It's almost like you deserve to be treated like that.
And absolutely, because it's the basis of this whole movement is so built on shame and fear, and if you're not in line, you're out of line, and you can totally go to hell.
Well, part of it though is because I feel that you had no identity.
Yeah, I mean, the identity I was given is I'm going to get married and have 20 kids, and that's it.
Well, you no identity in the sense that you as a woman are subservient, or in some ways, maybe I'm paraphrasing it, but not as good as a man.
Mm-hmm.
And so therefore you come out of this cult, you're in life, and you still have those feelings, and they transfer to other things, that you're not as good as everyone else, and therefore you allow people to treat you in a way because you think, I don't deserve it. I'm not a psychologist, but as you saw from one of my videos, my daughter is a neuropsychologist.
Yes, I did.
I talked to her like that. I sometimes said, hey, sweetheart, you think your dad's crazy? Oh yeah, Dad, you're crazy. So
yeah. And I would say, I didn't really make the step away from religion until probably 2019 or so. I still tried to get back into church because I was like, well, I don't really hate the idea of God, but that whatever that was not it. I didn't feel like that's the way that God wants people to behave. Controlling people's behavior with tactics of shame and fear. And so I did end up going back to a church, trying to, get involved. And I sat there in the pew one day, and he was talking about how if you are on antidepressants, it means that you do not trust God enough to take care of you. And that is sinful. And that's just because you don't have enough faith.
That's the problem. And if anybody's listening to this and they say, well, you're just being rude, but a lot of these guys are just nut jobs.
Yeah.
I remember I lived 30 years in St. Louis, and I remember the Archbishop there saying, oh, if you vote for politicians who've, support abortion, you're committing a mortal sin. That kind of stuff, sin by osmosis. And I've also heard theories about, well, if you cause somebody else to sin, you're responsible for their sins for eternity.
Yeah.
All that other stuff. And it's just like, really, I look at it and say, well, I don't know if that's what God or Jesus or Muhammad intended, but therein this is part of the problem, So you feel that it's this leaving or living in this thing gave you basically a feeling of not being good enough, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Still to this day, I suffer from imposter syndrome where I'm like, am I really qualified to be an adult?
Well, I think you're good at what you do,
Thank
but
you. Thank you.
I think, they're working well too. So
Good. I'm so glad to hear it.
I just think that it's amazing the life you had and how you at
Yes.
such a young age didn't get damaged by this for the rest of your life. I mean, obviously you had some hurdles, but you didn't let this thing destroy your life. I mean, that's amazing. I think that's amazing, Lydia.
That's something that I really do feel like I personally am very resilient, like at any time I could have just decided, you know what, I'm just going to give up. I'm going to go get addicted to drugs and I'm going to, poo-poo my life away. But, at the age of 19, actually, so, 3 years after getting out of this church situation, I started having some health issues and went to a doctor, and they were like, I think you have arthritis. And so I ended up going to a rheumatologist, and I got diagnosed with juvenile rheumatoid arthritis. And so the chronic illness journey alongside of that, first of all, I had to be more responsible and make more responsible choices than I necessarily even wanted to, because of the fact that, no, I have to have a good job that has good health insurance because these treatments are very expensive, and it's, you have to stay on top of your health and your doctor's visits. And I can't just, go and decide, you know what, I'm going to quit my job and go figure out what I want to do and sow my wild oats. I had to stay in a job. I had to stay employed. I had to keep health insurance. I had to keep up with my health because this illness, when given the chance, will take over your life. And so that really definitely kind of was a wake up call for me as far as, okay, well, you can do it. You got to figure out a way to do it one way or another. Whether or not you can, you got to at least give it the good old college try. And, I just had to start taking health. My health is my biggest priority, and so I think that helped a lot in a weird way, because, who would say, chronic illness is the greatest thing to happen to somebody, but it really did.
Behind the silver
It really did. It gave me a new perspective, and if I can do this, I can do anything. Right. If I can handle this, I can do anything.
What doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Exactly.
Lydia, in closing here, what advice would you give to somebody who needs to get out of a situation like you were in? What's the one advice you would say?
The first step is always the hardest. It really is. There's so much uncertainty that goes into a big decision like that, to leave something that's comfortable and, it's familiar. But there's also so many bigger and better things out there if you just give them a chance. You have to, and give yourself permission to make mistakes. None of us are perfect. We're all going to do something the wrong way at one point in our lives, and there's no sense in punishing yourself for that and making that the reason and the excuse that you stay in the situation that you're in. Every day is a new opportunity to make a change if you'll let it be.
That is such great advice. And thank you so much. And everyone,
Yes.
please click below and subscribe to my channel, Conversations with Rudy Rivera. I'm thrilled to have had Lydia. And thank you so much, Lydia. This has been such a
Yes.
pleasant
Thank you so much for
conversation.
having me.
Oh, I'm so glad. And we'll probably have to do a part 2. So thank you so much.
That's just fine. Just let me know when.
Don't forget, you are watching Conversations with Rudy Rivera.